Prison officers cracking down on contraband behind bars, seizing nearly 3 dozen phones, chargers, Wi-Fi boxes, and more. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Philip Davis is set to meet with U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris to discuss immigration after he is honored in Miami. And then in our news at 7:30, the opposition is demanding answers and a parliamentary inquiry into the collapse of FTX. Our news live at 7 starts now. Welcome to our news live at 7. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Kendino Knowles. Darian Smith, the man accused of murdering his girlfriend's 4-year-old daughter in 2021, has been sentenced to 25 years in prison as part of a plea deal. Danya, baby Bella Walker, died on November 5th as a result of a beating by Smith. The 6 months that he spent on remand before he was granted bail will be deducted from the overall sentence. Bella's mother, Ostonia Walker, is awaiting sentencing after she pleaded guilty to charges of exposing a child to grievous harm and child cruelty. Their trial was supposed to begin before Justice Renee McKay. However, they decided to forego a trial after receiving legal advice. On the day in question, Bella's mother left her in Smith's care when she went to work. An ambulance was called to the couple's apartment after Bella became unresponsive following a beating. An autopsy showed that Bella suffered multiple injuries to the head and torso. Smith was represented by Damian White, and Cassie Bethel was prosecutor in the case. And our news understands that the man killed in Flamingo Gardens yesterday is 30-year-old Hugh Bowe. Police reported that just before 4 p.m., Bowe and 2 women were about to get into a vehicle when they were approached by 2 armed men. Police say the suspects shot Bowe multiple times and escaped along Bahama Boulevard. Bowe is known to police and was wanted in connection with the murder investigation. And investigators are also probing an alleged suicide of an elderly Caucasian man in Eleuthera. Officers from the Eleuthera Division say they responded to a vessel in distress with an elderly man on board just after 11 a.m. Sunday. While assisting the vessel to shore, officers say they heard the sound of a single gunshot. Now, officers say after they secured the vessel, they entered the cabin and found the man with a single gunshot wound in his upper torso. They say a shotgun was found next to the body. A local doctor responded to the scene and confirmed his death. 35 phones, chargers, Wi-Fi boxes, and cigarette lighters, all found in prison cells in the latest joint operation at the Department of Corrections. Royal Bahamas Police, Defense Force, immigration officers, and the Bahamas Department of Corrections say they also found more than 40 man-made sharpened edge tools and drugs. The cells and inmates search happened 10 o'clock Sunday night and 6:30 this morning. No word on if those inmates will be facing additional charges. And a call for an end to senseless killings of young men at the start of the legal year here in New Providence and Grand Bahama. Our Berthany McDermott reports.
The answer to our crime problem is tied to saving our young men. That's the message of Rector of Pro Cathedral of Christ the King, Canon Norman Lightbourne, as he addressed members of Grand Bahama's legal fraternity. Lightbourne saying, "We are losing too many young men."
These were supposed to be our doctors. These were supposed to be our priests. And so many of them have met untimely deaths.
2022 wrapped up with record murder numbers, more than 125 to be exact. The majority, if not all, were men. The year opened with a double homicide involving a male and a female. Lightbourne believes the issue goes back to the home.
We have too many dysfunctional homes in our country. If we have dysfunctional homes, brothers and sisters, we're going to have dysfunctional schools. We're going to have a dysfunctional society.
He added that too many homes are fatherless and fathers are not living up to their responsibilities. Despite oftentimes doing it successfully, he says it's difficult for women to raise boys on their own.
And many of them, my hat is off to them, they have actually done so. I'm a wonderful example of being raised by a woman.
The Grand Bahama rector reasons that unless we address this issue, the killing will continue.
Deal with the root cause, the problem in our homes. We'll be dealing with this for years to come. We'll be dealing with this until the cows fly.
Reporting for Our News, I'm Berthany McDermott.
All right, and dozens of Haitian and Cuban nationals were apprehended in what's been a busy weekend for immigration officers. Officers say 94 Haitians were found on Ragged Island, 67 men and 27 women. 5 more Haitian nationals were transported from Managua after being found in an area known as the Bus. Next, a cruise ship turned rescue ship as the Liberty of the Seas rescued 17 Cubans from the Northwest Providence Channel. And some local fishermen in Bimini also rescuing 9 Cubans at sea who were later transported to Nassau. We are told that all of the migrants are being processed at the detention center with plans for immediate repatriation. And still talking immigration, the Prime Minister is set to talk with United States Vice President Kamala Harris on the issue of immigration. Davis flew from Miami to Washington, D.C. this afternoon and will meet with Harris on Tuesday. A statement by the Office of the Prime Minister says the pair will discuss issues of national security, namely irregular migration and gun trafficking. His duties as chairman of CARICOM will then take him to meetings at the Organization of American States, where he's expected to detail priorities for the region, focusing on fostering international cooperation for both security and economic growth. Davis is expected to return to country on Wednesday, January 18th. Our News was in South Florida this morning, where he spoke about his upcoming visit to the White House. We'll have more on that coming up at 7:30 as well as an honor he received today. We'll get to that in just a bit, but for now, it's time for your first look at temperatures. The meteorologist Greg Thompson is standing by in the Weather Center. Greg, my car's thermostat registered 68 degrees on Saturday.
Well, it's actually...
Are we expecting...
It was colder. It got down into the 50s in some locations here in the capital as well.
It certainly felt that way.
We are likely to see close to the 50-degree mark once again. Low 50s, low to mid-50s again expected. And we did get that, as I mentioned, last evening. So, yeah, one more evening of cool temperatures, then we're going to start.
I know there are a lot of people that are happy about it and others with allergies like me that aren't necessarily all that excited.
You would have to worry about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we're settling now into the 60s, mid-60s, 67 right now. Under partly cloudy skies, we still have a bit of clouds out there, so temperatures will be slow to fall, but they will continue to fall. North winds at 6 miles per hour, and your field-strike temperature at 62. Temperatures around the family violence right now tonight it's 64 in Grand Bahama, 68 in Alistown, Bimini, as well as in Great Harbor Key, 67 in Marsh Harbor. Over in Governor's Harbor, we had 69, 67 in Nicholstown, and here in the capital, Central Bahamas, temperatures near the 70-degree mark there with 69 in Kemps Bay, 71 in Arthurstown, Cat Island. We pick up 73s in Georgetown and then Deadman's Key. Over in Coburn Towns and South Law, you guys at 70. And in the Southeast Bahamas, temperatures a little warmer into the low to mid-70s there with 74s in Duncantown, Ragged Island, Colonel Hill, Cricket Island, Delectable Bay, Abrams Bay, all 73. Matthew Town, Inagua, 75, and our neighbors to the southeast, Turks and Caicos Islands, you are 74 at this hour. Satellite view, nothing much to talk about in the weather. High pressure is in charge of our weather. We do have some clouds just to the east of the islands. That's all due to the cold air mass moving over slightly warmer waters, and it's going to continue to keep those clouds to the east of us. Some of that will drift across us, and as I mentioned, temperatures will be slow to fall, but they will continue to fall. This high pressure will stay with us for at least another day, but it's expected to continue to slide out towards the east. That will turn our winds more east to southeast over the next several days, so we are expecting a warmer. That's your first look at weather. Stick with us. So look at your extended forecast.
Still to come on Our News, Prime Minister Philip Davis among the men honored at the 30th annual Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Scholarship Breakfast in Miami. You'll only see it here with our Jamila Mizik. Are you being charged extra to use your credit or debit card at certain stores? If so, a financial educator says those merchants are going against their bank and card network agreements. We'll tell you all about it. And later, when temperatures dip, we bundle up, but some elderly residents can't afford to. We'll tell you how you can help them stay warm on cooler nights. The story when Our News returns. The nation's leader among a special group of distinguished men honored today at the 30th annual Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Scholarship Breakfast in Miami. Our Jamila Mizik was there.
It is Martin Luther King Jr. Day here in the United States of America, a special day for many Americans. And the day was also a highlight for three Bahamians, one of them our very own Prime Minister, Philip Davis. It is the brainchild of U.S. Congresswoman Frederica Wilson. 30 years ago, she founded the 5,000 Role Models of Excellence Project, a mentorship program for at-risk young men. Today, the program has grown with thousands of role models across the state of Florida, and this year, 49 young men were awarded scholarships. Bringing remarks was the second gentleman of the United States, Douglas Emhoff, husband of U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris. And among the number of role models inducted today were Bahamians, former Minister of Youth, Sports and Culture, Dr. Danny Johnson, Consul General in Miami, Kurt Hollingsworth, and Prime Minister Philip Davis.
The issues with men and boys are not peculiar to the Bahamas. It's a worldwide phenomenon, and it requires intervention. We need to disrupt the path on which many of them are on, and this initiative is one that I see does such positive interruptions. And I was happy to be here today, this morning, to witness the results of such interventions, and hopefully we'll be able to do this in the Bahamas as well.
Prime Minister Davis also receiving the key to Miami-Dade County.
I hope I can use it to unlock further conversations with you, since we are fighting many of the same fights, from rising sea levels to public safety to reinvigorating tourism, because sharing solutions is always a good thing.
Actor Omari Hardwick was also named the official national spokesman for the 5,000 Role Models of Excellence Project. Reporting for our news from Miami, Florida, I'm Jamila Mizik.
All right, thanks, Jamila. Well, the Free National Movement questioning this recent travel to Miami by the Prime Minister, who was being honored there. Our news team can confirm multiple cabinet ministers and PLP MPs are in Miami to attend the event. They include Grand Bahama Minister Ginger Moxie, State Public Service Minister Pia Glover-Roll, State Social Services Minister Lisa Raming, House Speaker Patricia DeVoe, and Senate President Michelle Adderley. Pintard telling our news he was unaware of the trip.
Whenever public officials travel who are on government payroll, particularly in large numbers, they're still being paid their regular salary. So aside from just the airfare, the hotels, etc., we need to know, are they on official government business? And if they're not, who's paying for that particular trip? It's all. I mean, that's a standard thing.
And following that recent controversial trip to Bermuda for a political event that cost just under $60,000, Pintard says it's important for government to reveal the details of future trips.
This administration, more than any other, has to give that account because they've proven to be untrustworthy in terms of when they do take trips. The Bermuda trip is a prime example.
The Bahamas Chamber of Commerce releasing a statement following concerns from the Clearing Banks Association over ongoing practices by merchants who charge customers an additional fee to process credit and debit card transactions, as well as requiring a minimum or maximum transaction amount. The Chamber noting that it is their expectation that all merchants comply with their bank and card network agreements. Certified financial educator Celine Newton says it is an issue of non-compliance, and those expenses should be for the business owner and not the customer.
When the merchants would have created these agreements, it would have indicated that this is not something that they should pass on to the customer in that way. My suggestion would be is that business owners need to incorporate that as a part of their overhead, and when they determine their prices, make sure that that's absorbed in the prices.
And she adds that consumers should also be vigilant.
Because that is the right way. That's an expense of the business owner, and it should not be passed on to the customer or client in that way because it goes against the agreement that they would have made.
2 months ago, the Bahamas Agricultural Industrial Corporation signed a memorandum of understanding with wholesale agency Milo Butler and Sons Limited to sell and distribute Bahamian grown and processed products. Agriculture Minister Clay Sweeting giving reporters an update on that partnership ahead of the weekly cabinet meeting.
That partnership started in November, so they're working together, and we have a lot of Bahamians that has been creating jams, jellies, and other add-on products for a long time. So we're glad to be able to facilitate this transaction between the people in the production aspect of agriculture to help to facilitate this relationship.
And Sweeting says they will continue to monitor the success of the partnership.
They'll continue to monitor it to get a real sense of where we're at. I'm thinking in a few months we'll be able to see how much things we've seen on the shelf. But we're excited about the relationship.
When our news comes back from the break, we turn our spotlight to stories making headlines across the world as the fastest man in the world may be left chasing down lost investments. Plus, Foreign Affairs Minister Fred Mitchell leads a delegation to a CARICOM Community Council meeting in Guyana just 1 month before CARICOM leaders descend on the Bahamas. And later, with temperatures dropping, one church is working to make sure elderly residents are covered. We'll tell you how you can help on the other side of the break. This is our news. Welcome back. We turn our attention now to stories making headlines across the world. At least 68 people were killed Sunday when an aircraft went down near the city of Pokhara in central Nepal. Officials say it's the country's deadliest plane crash in more than 30 years. 72 people, 4 crew members and 68 passengers were on board when it crashed. Civil aviation officials say 37 were men, 25 women, 3 children and 3 infants. Search efforts were called off after dark as hundreds of first responders had still been working to locate the missing. Meanwhile, Italy's most wanted mafia boss, Matteo Messina Denaro, has been arrested in Sicily after 30 years on the run. He was reportedly detained in a private clinic where he was receiving treatment for cancer. He's alleged to be a boss of the notorious Cosa Nostra Mafia and was tried and sentenced to life in jail in absentia in 2002 over numerous murders. More than 100 members of the armed forces were involved in his arrest. In addition to murder, the mafia boss also oversaw racketeering, illegal waste dumping, money laundering, and drug trafficking. A Metropolitan Police armed officer who used his role to put fear into his victims has admitted dozens of rape and sexual offenses against 12 women in the United Kingdom. 48-year-old David Carrick, who met some victims through dating websites, pleaded guilty to 49 offenses across 2 decades. The Met has apologized after it emerged he had come to the attention of police over 9 incidents, including rape allegations between 2000 and 2021. A senior officer said his offending was unprecedented in policing.
It's devastating for the victims that have had to go through pain and suffering at the hands of a serving police officer. It is devastating to the trust and confidence that we are working so hard to earn from women and girls across London. It's devastating to colleagues of David Carrick, but we know this is a day that policing has definitely taken a step back, but we are absolutely committed and determined to go forward.
Jamaican sprint legend Usain Bolt is facing a possible wipeout of his investment in stocks and securities limited after what sources say was a massive fraud amounting to more than $1.2 billion. Last Thursday, SSL issued a statement saying that it had become aware of fraudulent activity by a former employee of the company. Bolt is now fearing that the monies which he had hoped to access in his later years will likely not be recovered. A source telling the Jamaica Observer the information was delivered to Bolt's management team last week, just before the company went public about the massive fraud. The athlete is among 30 others facing losses. Well, a community council meeting is set to be held in Guyana this week ahead of CARICOM's regular heads of government meeting next month. Leading the country's delegation will be Foreign Affairs Minister Fred Mitchell. Speaking to us from Washington, Mitchell explained the significance of this week's upcoming meeting.
The community council And the Community Council is made up of all of the foreign ministers of CARICOM. And there is a meeting which is taking place on the 19th of January. I'm the chair because the Bahamas in the chair, so I'll be chairing that meeting. And the whole purpose of that meeting is to set the agenda for the meeting, which takes place in Nassau between the 16th and 18th of January.
Mitchell shared what's on the agenda.
We would expect that there'd be detailed discussions, particularly on the question of migration, and particularly as it affects Haitian migration and the impact which it is having on the economies of all of our countries. Of course, the Bahamas is front and center at that, and we've been working for the better part of this administration on trying to help see what we can do to resolve those issues. Climate change, along with migration, the question of food security or agriculture, as you mentioned, all of those are there. Of course, there are a number of other routine aspects to the meeting.
Still to come on Our News Today in History, find out interesting facts about the day that was January 16th, as Lyndon O. Pinland was sworn in on this day in 1967 as the first black premier of the Bahama Islands. Plus, Greg is back with your extended weather forecast. And then in Our News at 7:30, what will the future of Junkanoo judging be? Well, the minister responsible is taking a stance. When Our News continues. Welcome back to Our News. It's time now to turn our spotlight on events that shaped the day that was January 16th. Take a look. On this day in Bahamian history, in colonial 1967, Lyndon Oscar Pinland was sworn in as premier. He was the first black premier and second overall after Roland Simonet. Then in 2019, a Smithsonian Magazine article about Bahamian conchs highlighted a new study that had found the country's conchs have undergone serial depletion. The study, published in the journal Reviews in Fisheries, Science and Aquaculture, analyzed surveys of conchs in the Bahamas taken between 2009 and 2017. Researchers then compared the data to historic surveys dating back to 1987. Authors of the new study found intense fishing had a dire impact as the number of adult conchs have fallen in direct proportion to increased fishing pressure. Then in 2022, after a year-long delay by the pandemic, World Expo was underway in Dubai. Prime Minister Philip Davis, who was the keynote, was accompanied by the Police Band, All-Star Band, Junkanoo, and Dynamite Daisy Productions, to name a few. Over 160 Bahamians were there to perform. Thousands passed through the Bahamian pavilion, which the Prime Minister toured. In all, 192 countries were on display. Well, as temperatures drop this week, a local church is giving back to the elderly. Reverend Eileen Johnson and the Lighthouse Fellowship Church of God are on a mission to ensure that the vulnerable are protected. Joshua Williams explains how.
The Lighthouse Fellowship Church of God is doing their part in looking out for the defenseless in the community. The church is now accepting donations that will help give blankets to the elderly. Pastor of the church, Reverend Eileen Johnson, says she's grateful for the support so far. However, they need more help.
The results have been so good thus far. However, we still need some blankets because we know that the temperature is supposed to drop tonight. And persons in old folks' home, they're elderly and they're dealing with arthritis and rheumatism and all of that. So even if it's not cold, they're still cold.
Johnson also believes churches should not only preach the word, but they should also walk the talk.
We're fulfilling what Jesus says. He says, if you do it to the least of them, you're doing it unto me. And if a lot of persons would take up that mindset, the world will be a better place if we would just do what the Lord says to do. And it doesn't take the big things. It's the simple things, the little things.
If you would like to help out, you can drop off blankets or donations at the church that's located in Pinewood Gardens. Reporting for Our News, I'm Joshua Williams.
All right, thanks for that, Joshua. To watch that again and for all of today's top stories, visit ournews.bs. That's going to do it for us in News at 7. Natalia Hall is up now with the latest headlines. Natalia?
And great to see our precious pearls get some much-needed assistance, right?
Absolutely. This
After
weather
such a
no
chilly
joke.
weekend. Yeah. How was your weekend overall?
68 degrees on Saturday, but you know, Sunday. Remember you asked me at the beginning of the year about my New Year's resolution? Patience. I remember. A couple was behind me on the groceries aisle, and I had to run to my car and get something, and they were very patient with me. And you know, what it reminded me of was just that, the patience, but also that, you know, a little kindness goes a long way, and they were really kind to me.
Goes a long way.
Yeah.
All right, great story, Ken. Thanks so much. All right, and we have the latest on an alleged reoffender who's back in court, and more on that meeting between the Prime Minister and the U.S. Vice President. New tonight on Our News Live at 7:30, the Prime Minister gives us a preview of what he expects to discuss with United States Vice President Kamala Harris as the two meet. You'll only see it on Our News. But first, a teen pleads guilty to having an assault rifle after an alleged rift with another teen over a girl. Plus, the Free National Movement wants answers in a parliamentary inquiry into the collapse of FTX. New insight tonight. And later, it takes a village to raise a child and the community to fight crime. Why one youth advocate is calling on everyone to step up. Our News Live at 7:30 starts in a moment. Welcome to Our News, and thank you for joining us. I'm Natalia Hall. A man on bail for murder and attempted murder is accused of reoffending. Prosecutors say Mario Kofe shot and killed Trevon Joseph, an attempted murder of Nelson Adderley last month. Both victims were shot on December 30th, 2022 as they stood outside a home on Key West Street. Joseph died in hospital on December 31st, and Adderley was released after getting treatment. Kofe was not required to enter pleas to the charges when he appeared before Chief Magistrate Joyanne Ferguson Pratt today. He was remanded to prison until April 4th. Kofe was already on bail for the 2021 shooting death of Gladstone Francis and the attempted murder of Savannah Francis when prosecutors say he reoffended. Now the pair was injured in a drive-by shooting at First Street, Coconut Grove. Darion Smith, the man accused of murdering his girlfriend's 4-year-old daughter in 2021, has been sentenced to 25 years in prison as a part of a plea deal. Deonia Baby Bella Walker died on November 5th as a result of beating by Smith. The 6 months that Smith spent on remand before he was granted bail will be deducted from the overall sentence. Bella's mother, Ostonia Walker, is awaiting sentencing after she pleaded guilty to charges of exposing a child to grievous harm and child cruelty. An autopsy showed that Bella suffered multiple injuries to the head and torso. Smith was represented by Damon White, and Cassie Bethel was the prosecutor in the case. A 15-year-old is behind bars awaiting sentencing in relation to the seizure of a loaded assault rifle. Police arrested the teen on January 11th after receiving reports that he was firing an AK-47 on Wilton Street. Police seized the rifle along with 22 rounds of ammunition. The teen reportedly armed himself after he got into a fight with another teenager over a girl. He pleaded guilty to charges of possession of prohibited weapons and ammunition when he appeared before the juvenile court today. The teen was remanded to the Simpson Penn School for Boys until April 12th. A 26-year-old man of Dunmore Street is being questioned by police in connection with a shooting through Rupert Dean Lane. The incident happened just after 8 p.m. when the 24-year-old victim was standing outside his home. Police say that's when he was approached and shot multiple times by two men with handguns. The victim was taken to hospital in a private vehicle where he is detained in critical condition. Now investigations are continuing. Prime Minister Philip Davis will meet with U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris at the White House in Washington, D.C. tomorrow. Now, during that meeting, the two will discuss a number of issues. Now, the Our News team caught up with the Prime Minister in Miami, who gave us a breakdown ahead of that meeting.
The restart of the Clarence facility in Freeport, We need to discuss the migration issues that impact us, both from Cuba and Haiti, and the other issues that about climate change and the rest of it, to see how we can have them recognize and be sensitized to the obligation to fund the loss and damage initiative that was agreed to at COP 27 in Egypt, and of course, just to see how we could strengthen the relationship between ourselves.
Davis was in Miami receiving very special honors on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Following Davis' visit to the White House, he will attend meetings at the Organization of American States, where as chairman of CARICOM, he will outline priorities for the region and underscore the importance of cooperation in promoting security and economic growth.
I also have the issues of food security, energy security, and financial issues. That is a wider picture, also wider initiatives that is from the CARICOM, and as the new incoming chair of CARICOM, I'm to raise those issues with her as well.
Well, another cool day in the capital as temperatures dip below 70 degrees tonight. Meteorologist Greg Thompson joins us with the latest live from the Weather Center. Good evening, Greg.
Yeah, thanks, Natalia.
Now, this weekend was pretty chilly, and I spoke with my mom in Freeport, and it was even more chilly there. Greg, how long can we expect these temperatures to continue?
They had 40s in Freeport.
Wow.
We had 50s here. We're going to see 50s again once more tonight.
Wow.
But temperatures expected to rise as the high that's sitting across us basically is controlling our weather and is keeping us pretty nice. Nice air mass across us will slide out towards the east. And our winds will become more easterly, so we're going to get that tropical air mass in. So,
all right, everyone buckle up.
Cooler temperatures, and then we warm up.
Okay.
Yeah. 66 degrees outside our studios, though, right now under partly cloudy skies. Winds out of the northeast at 6 miles per hour in your feels-like temperature. We could call that a cool 63 degrees. Satellite view, quiet weather around our islands. That frontal boundary that pushed through is well out towards the east. High pressure smack across the northern islands, centered really across the northern islands. And the light winds, and we're going to see some of these clouds erode as it goes on, will allow our temperatures to fall off. So we're looking once again for some 50s again tonight. Grand Bahama, the Upper Coast, could see some low 50s, and it's going to be chilly, but we expect a gradual warm-up over the next couple of days as that high moves out towards the east and into the Atlantic. That's your first check on weather. Stick with us. Say look at the forecast. It's still to come.
Still to come on our news, unanswered questions around the collapse of FTX leave the opposition calling for a parliamentary inquiry. New details tonight. And demolish. The Freeport Garden Resort on East Mall Drive on Grand Bahama is gone. Why the Grand Bahama Port Authority made the decision to get rid of the building. Plus, the Youth, Sports and Culture Minister stands firm in his response to complaints about the Junkanoo judging system. That's all coming up when our news returns. The Free National Movement is asking for a closer look into the fallout of FTX, as the party leader insists there remains too many unanswered questions. Here's Berthrine McDermott with the details.
Free National Movement leader Michael Pintard is calling for a parliamentary inquiry into the collapse of crypto giant FTX, saying there are still multiple questions that remain unanswered.
We need a full parliamentary inquiry where there is authority given to parliamentarians to call for papers, documents, individuals to meet anywhere in our jurisdiction or otherwise in order to get a clear sense of whether or not there was any special privileges given to anyone that was associated with FTX. Were there any government officials or PEPs, persons closely related to them, who benefited?
The opposition has tried to raise the issue of FTX in Parliament, but was shut down by members of the government almost every time. As the matter is before the courts, Pintard says the inquiry won't interfere with proceedings.
We have taken legal advice, and we know the aspect that is sub judice, and the portion that we have stayed away from is talking great deal about the assets.
The FNM believes the Davis administration was slow in addressing the rumors and accusations that began swirling internationally once the company went belly up. And when the government finally spoke out on the issue, Pintard says the Attorney General was the wrong person to do it. The FNM leader also gave these suggestions as to what the government could have done.
The government ought to have had an immediate roundtable discussion, certainly with the opposition, with members of the financial services sector, and the government should have laid out the salient details.
Reporting for Our News, I'm Berthany McDermott.
Thanks, Berthany. Well, the Freeport Garden Resort located on East Small Drive and Adventures Way is officially gone following a demolition exercise by the Grand Bahama Port Authority. The GBPA says the demolition is in line with Section 11 of the Freeport Building Code and Sanitary Code bylaws. Now, this video shows a demolition excavator tearing down parts of the building that once housed a number of people. The building has been a part of the Freeport community for decades. You may recall that following Hurricane Matthew, the Freeport Garden Resort was damaged and some parts of the roof caved. The building's issues intensified following Hurricane Dorian. And now to a story we've been following this month, issues at Grand Bahama's Fishing Hole Road. The latest issue, a malfunctioning traffic light system at the intersection at Queens Highway and the Fishing Hole Road. The light has been out of commission for several weeks. As a result, the intersection was placed in a four-way stop mode for the safety of the motoring public. That's according to Grand Bahama Port Authority's Deputy Director and City Manager of Building and Development Services, Troy McIntosh. The GBPA's City Management Department advises road users to drive with caution as they are waiting on new parts to fix the issue. They say that's been hampered by global supply chain challenges. In the meantime, the city manager is asking motorists to adhere to the rules of the four-way stop. Well, the first 100 participants of the Bahamas National Youth Guard program arrived in Grand Bahama today. The new program for Bahamians between the ages of 18 and 25 years old, hoping to teach them a host of skills needed for the country's national disaster plan. Head of the Division of Youth, Sandina Neely, sharing more details.
The 3-month training for the National Youth Guard members. The National Youth Guard is a program for 18 to 25-year-olds who will be trained to assist in the event of an emergency or a disaster, and they are going to be trained to assist at every aspect of the country's national disaster plan. That's from prevention and mitigation all the way to response and recovery. So for the 3 months of this training, they're going to be having physical training, drill training conducted by the Defense Force and the Police Force. They're also going to be in classrooms.
And the training does not stop there.
And once they're done with the 3-month internship, 3-month training, they will then undergo a 3-month internship in the islands where they live. And then once they conclude that first 6 months, they will be on call, like reserves, for 2 years. Whenever there's a disaster or an emergency that occurs, these agencies that are our partners and stakeholders will have a reservoir in the National Youth Guard to call upon for these young people to come and assist, and they'll be on their islands assisting.
It's now time for tonight's Financial Market Minute, brought to you by RF, your local investment bank. This has been your Financial Market Minute. To explore the best performing mutual funds in the Bahamas, visit our website at www.rfgroup.com.
When our news comes back from the break, what's the future of Junkanoo judging? The Youth Sports and Culture Minister stands firm.
Plus, coming up in sports for tonight, the latest is WNBA star Jonquel Jones has a new home. She's going to be heading to New York. We'll give you details on that. We'll also tell you how the UB Mingos have continued their play in the local light leagues. And, of course, the latest from all around as another one of our Major League Baseball players, or at least a new baseball player, heads onto the professional ranks. That's all ahead in sports.
And it takes a village to raise a child and make a difference. How small steps can make a big impact on crime in the country. The details when our news returns. This is Our News. Welcome back. The Youth, Sports and Culture Minister is responding to calls by a well-known A-category Junkanoo group for the judging system to be abolished. Marlena Leonard has the story.
Minister of Youth, Sports and Culture Mario Boleg is proud of this year's most recent Junkanoo parades.
I think Junkanoo season has been the best we would have seen over the years. I think it, and every parade I attend to, Cat Island, Exuma, Grand Bahama, and New Providence thus far, they were the largest attendees parade in my lifetime that I've seen. And just by the performance of the Junkanoos, you could tell that they missed Junkanoo.
But not everyone felt like the parades were a success. Roots Junkanoo Group, for example, held an entire press conference shortly after the parades, calling for the abolition of the current judging system. Roots Junkanoo Group leader Wendell Francis even went as far to call the current system a cancer. When we asked Boleg about these rumblings,
the JCNP and New Providence, when we talk about Roots and those who made complaint, they're the one who make the rules. So the groups themselves, in partnership with the JCMP, who makes up the JCMP, makes the rules that govern themselves.
Roots placed 4th in the 2022 Boxing Day Parade and 3rd place for the 2023 New Year's Day Junkanoo Parade. Roots members have said a revamp of the judging system is needed to provide a fair chance for all groups. Still, Boleg's stance is clear.
When you make the rules and then you train the judges and you all agree to the judges, you may complain, but at the end of the day, they are the persons you chose. They are the rules that you set in place. So at the end of the day, you have to govern yourself by your rules. And at the end of the day, you hope that you choose individuals who are competent, who are loyal, and who are ethical in their judging.
Reporting for Our News, I'm Marlena Leonard.
Thanks, Marlena. Well, the Chinese embassy continuing its goodwill efforts in the community, this time by donating some 15 wheelchairs to the National Commission for Persons with Disabilities. The ambassador for the People's Republic, Cheng Li Dai, says this is not the first time they have partnered with the commission, and it won't be the last.
We understand in the past few years of the pandemic and economic downturn around the world, people in the Bahamas, particularly those vulnerable populations who encounter even more difficulties, they are seeing their lives to be particularly challenging. We totally sympathize with them, and we will be happy to do whatever we can to help make their life just a bit easier. So today we hope the wheelchairs will come in handy.
Chairperson of the Commission, Nalini Bathel, expressing her gratitude for the donations. She says donations go a long way in improving the quality of life for those living with disabilities.
It's like immeasurable because this means so much to persons who are suffering from various disabilities. This is a way of enabling them to live more productive lives instead of staying home. This will enable such donations, enable persons with disabilities to move in the community, be socially active, to go to educational opportunities. I mean, just because you're in a wheelchair doesn't mean that you cannot do anything.
All right, such a great initiative. Well, now switching to sports, Grand Bahama native Jonquel Jones headed to the Big Apple after a big WNBA trade. Meanwhile, the Mingos continue to struggle in local basketball, and another son of the soil signs a professional baseball contract. Here's Marcellus Hall with a check on sports.
All right, thanks, Natalia. Welcome to Our Sports, everybody. I'm Marcellus Hall. Jonquel Jones has been a Connecticut Sun for just about her entire career. That will change coming into the new season. News of a blockbuster trade as she now heads to New York. Let's take a look at the details. Grand Bahama native Jonquel Jones is headed to a new place of business as Jonquel Jones now has been traded. According to last reports, the former WNBA MVP will now make her home in New York, playing for the Liberty. The Dallas Wings also reportedly part of the three-team deal. Liberty will receive Jonquel and Kayla Thornton. The Sun will add Rebecca Allen and Taisha Harris, New York's 6th overall pick in the 2023 draft. Jones reportedly made a specific request to be headed to New York, who are now on the precipice of perhaps contending for a championship. She averaged 14.6 points, 8.6 rebounds, and 1.8 assists while shooting 36.9% from deep in 33 games last season, and now hopes to see those talents transcend to the New York scene. Meanwhile, news from basketball as the UB Mingos once again in action, playing in the New Providence Basketball Association. First shot, second quarter, Mingos trio Grant gets the rock to Delano Ambrister to one of his threes on the night. He had 17 points on the evening. Shockers holding off the Mingos' late surge. They take the win 67-53. And from baseball, another of our young Bahamian baseball players now signing his letter to say he is professional as Sebastian Walcott, joining the Texas Rangers organization as the number 8 overall international prospect. That's a huge deal. He is now set to make his way, hopefully, to professional ranks in short order. Walcott again signing from I-Elite organization with the Texas Rangers as of yesterday. And that is your check on sports here on this Monday. I'm Marcellus Hall. Back to you, Italia.
Still ahead on our news tonight, why a youth advocate says fighting crime goes beyond home and family life, and how you can be a part of the village that brings change. And how much longer will these cooler temperatures last? Well, Greg is back with your extended weather outlook on the other side of this break. Welcome back to our news. We're looking forward to another beautiful day tomorrow. Greg is back in the Weather Center now with your extended weather forecast.
Here's a look now at your national forecast. In your extended forecast, quiet weather, high pressure will remain in charge throughout the weekend, and of course those temperatures will start to climb back near the 80-degree mark throughout the remainder of the weekend, and once again another front expected sometime by early next week, but that's a long ways away. We keep an eye on that for you. That's a look at our weather. Back to you.
All right, thanks so much, Greg. I'll be sure to bundle up tonight before the warm temperatures reach in tomorrow.
Yeah.
All right, Greg. Well, Teen Challenge Bahamas Executive Director Eric Fox says the issue of at-risk youth is deeper than blaming the issue on single parents. In a sit-down interview with our Marlena Leonard, he explains how upbringing can go beyond biological parents for our youth.
Often when the conversation of crime and at-risk youth comes up in our churches, in particular, and our workplaces, the blame is quickly shifted to the alleged breakdown in family structures.
But that does not mean that because you're a single parent that your child has to fail. I grew up in a single home with just my mother, and there was a lot of us. I went down the road of failure, but there were different men who came into my life, and they made up for the part where my father was not. They made up for that.
But Executive Director of Teen Challenge Bahamas says while it can be easy to point the finger at single mothers, parenting can go beyond the bloodline and also come from the community.
Now, your father and your mother don't necessarily have to be your parents. The parent is the person who was there for you, the person who mentor you, the person who look out for you and who give you guidance.
He also warns that sometimes a parent's reaction to the initial warning signs of teens acting out can further agitate the underlying issue.
A lot of time, a lot of parents doesn't have communication skills. They scream and shout and, oh, you gonna make me do this? They scream and shout and act crazy. So indirectly they're teaching their children that this is how you control the situation by acting crazy.
Fox explains his method of looking at the problems as fruit on the tree, whether drugs or violence, saying removing the fruit is not as effective as addressing the root of the issue.
So I try to go a little deeper, what is it that you're dealing with. Most of the time it doesn't happen right away, but I think we can navigate a path that can bring some success.
Reporting for Our News, I'm Marlena Leonard.
Thanks so much, Marlena. And remember, you can watch that story again right on ournews.bs. You can also find all of today's top stories there as well and on the Our News Bahamas Facebook page. And with that, we thank you for joining us for Our News tonight. On behalf of the entire team, I'm Italia Hall. We'll see you tomorrow night. Have a great evening.